Grinding the edges of the workpiece. This module will explain how to make a setup and grind the edges of a workpiece by using the surface grinder with an angle plate and magnetic chuck. For this operation, it is assumed that the workpiece has already had the surfaces ground, so they are square and parallel to each other. Clamping the workpiece to an angle plate is one of the simplest methods for setting up a workpiece for an edge grinding operation. This procedure cannot be used with large workpieces. It is advisable to make the initial setup on a surface plate to ensure accuracy. Clean the angle plate thoroughly. Examine the workpiece carefully and remove any burrs with a fine file. Position one of the ground surfaces of the workpiece against the angle plate. The workpiece will have to be placed in a position that will allow the top and left-hand edges to protrude about 1/2 inch beyond the angle plate. If the workpiece is narrow, you may have to use parallels to raise it above the top of the angle plate. Use C-clamps and secure the workpiece to the angle plate. A piece of soft metal or heavy cardboard should be placed between the clamps and the workpiece to protect the finished surface of the work. Position the clamps so they won't interfere with the grinding operation. Clean the magnetic chuck thoroughly. Did you check it for nicks and burrs? Get a piece of paper, which is just a little larger than the angle plate, and place it on the magnetic chuck as close to the center as possible. Place the angle plate on the chuck so the base will be in full contact with the magnetic chuck. Use caution at this point so you don't do anything that will change the setup. Energize the magnetic chuck. You will be grinding two adjacent edges of the workpiece. Start by positioning the wheel head over the work. Lower it enough so the wheel is about 1/2 inch above the top edge of the work. If the grinder has an automatic reverse feature, set the table reverse dogs to give the wheel at least 1 inch clearance beyond each end of the work. Use the crossfeed handle and adjust the saddle so the edge of the wheel overlaps the workpiece by 1/8 of an inch. Start the spindle and lower the wheel. Stop when you see the first spark of contact. Use the crossfeed handle again and move the workpiece away from the wheel. Set the vertical feed hand wheel to 0, then lower the wheel head 3/1000ths for a rough cut. Set the table speed rate and engage the crossfeed. Start the coolant flow, then start the table. Watch the work as the first rough pass is made. If a lot of material has to be taken off before no more machine marks are visible, continue to make rough cuts of from 3 to 5/1000ths. After the first edge has been rough cut, redress the wheel. You will note that one clamp has been moved to clear the wheel as it is being dressed. Make a finish pass of 1/2,000th. Stop the machine after sparking out on the last pass. Move the work clear of the wheel. Then rotate the clamps up to the top of the workpiece. The clamps must be loosened and moved one at a time to prevent the setup from shifting. Turn off the chuck and carefully remove the angle plate assembly. You don't want to do anything to cause the workpiece to move out of position. Clean the chuck and angle plate again. Put the angle plate on the magnetic chuck on its side, so edge number 2 is on top, in grinding position. Using the same procedure you did with edge number 1, rough and finish grind edge number 2. With the adjacent edges 1 and 2 properly ground, it is easy to grind the remaining 2 edges. Assuming the workpiece has been removed, start by cleaning the magnetic chuck, the workpiece, and the angle plate. Place the angle plate back on the magnetic chuck. Remember to use a clean piece of paper. Set the workpiece against the angle plate. The ground edge should be toward the surface of the magnetic chuck, with edge number 3 in grinding position. It may be necessary to again use parallels to raise the top of the work above the angle plate and keep the edge parallel with the finished edge. Energize the chuck and clamp the workpiece to the angle plate. Proceed with the grinding operation in the same way you did with edge number 1. Repeat the procedure of turning the angle plate on its side, then grind edge number 4. Clean up the machine after the work is complete.